Before Rome was an empire, before the legions, the Caesars, and the Colosseum, there was only a river, a she-wolf, and a crime that changed everything. Rome didn't rise from marble, it rose from myth. But how does a story about abandoned twins and divine parentage turn into one of the greatest civilizations in human history? How did a murder between brothers lead to laws, legions, and world domination? And why did the Romans, a people so obsessed with order and reason, build their entire identity on a legend soaked in blood? To understand Rome, truly understand it, we have to start where it all began. Not with emperors, but with Romulus. Before we go deeper, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss a future upload. Alright, let's keep going. The story of Rome begins not with a date carved into stone or a name etched into papyrus, but with myth. Legend intertwined with fragments of truth. Long before Rome would become an empire, before it would stretch its influence across 3 continents, its future hung in the hands of 2 helpless infants, abandoned on the banks of the Tiber River. Their mother, Rhea Silvia, was a Vestal virgin, a priestess sworn to celibacy, and daughter of the rightful king of Alba Longa, a city in Latium. But Rhea broke her vow, or according to Roman tradition, she was chosen, not by any man, but by the god Mars himself. From this divine union came twin sons, Romulus and Remus, but their birth was a threat. Rhea's uncle, Amulius, had stolen the throne from her father and feared that any male descendant would one day challenge his rule. So, like so many tyrants before him, he chose to erase the threat before it grew. He ordered the babies to be drowned in the Tiber. But the river did not take them. Instead, the waters carried the infants gently downstream, where they were left at the foot of the Palatine Hill, the very site where Rome would one day rise. And it was there, according to legend, that something extraordinary happened. A she-wolf, feral, powerful, and maternal, discovered the crying twins. Rather than devour them, she nursed them, offering her milk to keep them alive. The image of this beast and the boys would become one of the most iconic symbols in Roman history, the Lupa Capitolina. Eventually, a shepherd named Faustulus found the boys. He and his wife raised them as their own, never revealing the true identity of their lineage. Romulus and Remus grew into strong, intelligent, and ambitious young men, leaders among their peers. But destiny has a way of revealing itself. As they matured, they uncovered the truth of their birth, their royal blood, and the crimes of their uncle Amulius. They returned to Alba Longa. Amulius was overthrown, their grandfather restored to the throne, and the brothers, now full of purpose, sought to found a city of their own near the river that had saved them. But where to build it? The brothers quarreled over location. Romulus favored the Palatine Hill, Remus preferred the Aventine, and as with many arguments between brothers, it escalated. To determine who was right, they turned to the gods, each watching for signs in the sky. Remus claimed to see 6 vultures, Romulus, 12. They both declared themselves winner. Tempers flared, words became shoves, then swords. And Romulus, the very name that would come to define an empire, killed his brother Remus. It was a tragic act, but in Roman eyes it was also a divine inevitability. The foundation of their city was stained with blood, a reminder that power always comes at a cost. Romulus claimed the site on the Palatine. Using a plow, he marked a sacred boundary, the Pomerium, around what would become Rome. The year was 753 BCE. This was more than a founding. It was the beginning of Roman time itself. The city Romulus founded was little more than a line in the dust, a sacred boundary scratched by a plow, encircling huts made of mud and straw. But even the greatest legends need people to survive. And in this, Rome faced an immediate crisis. Romulus had built a city, yes, but who would live in it? He turned to a radical solution, one that set Rome apart from its neighbors from the very beginning. While other Latin and Etruscan settlements restricted their walls to kinship groups, noble clans, and old bloodlines, Rome opened its gates to everyone society had cast aside. Runaway slaves, exiles, debtors, fugitives, refugees, men with broken pasts and no future. Romulus didn't tolerate these people, he invited them. He created a place called the Asylum on the slope of the Capitoline Hill and declared it open to all. There, men who had nowhere else to go could take shelter and be reborn as Romans. This policy wasn't just mercy, it was strategy. From its very beginning, Rome was a melting pot of misfits and strangers, a place where bloodlines mattered less than loyalty, where survival wasn't about purity but adaptability. That philosophy would ripple through Roman policy for centuries, in its citizenship laws, its military recruitment, and its imperial expansion. But a city of men could not survive without women. Rome's early population boom came with a glaring demographic flaw. It had plenty of soldiers and no mothers. Without families, Rome's new citizens were little more than squatters on a hill, ambitious, armed, but destined to vanish with the next generation. Romulus knew this, and he knew the surrounding communities, especially the Sabines, a proud and ancient Italic people, would never willingly give their daughters to a city of rootless men. So he staged a festival. When the blood of Remus soaked into the Palatine soil, Rome was no more than a fragile idea. It had no walls, no roads, no law, no memory, just a name and a founder with a murder on his hands. But over the next 2.5 centuries, a line of 7 kings, some mythical, some more historical, would shape that fragile idea into a city that could outlast them all. Each king added something fundamental, not just buildings or laws, but pieces of identity. Romulus ruled first. He built the Senate, or at least its seed, a council of 100 elders called patres, the fathers of the new city. He divided the people into tribes, created the first military units, and named the ruling class patricians. His rule ended, fittingly, in mystery. One day, during a storm, he vanished. The Romans claimed he was taken up by the gods and reborn as the divine Quirinus. Whether man or myth, Romulus was gone, but Rome remained. Then came Numa Pompilius, a king of peace. A Sabine by birth, he brought order to the chaos Romulus had left behind. It was Numa who softened Rome's edges, not with laws of war but rituals of worship. He created the Pontifex Maximus, the chief priest. He established the Vestal Virgins, the cult of Vesta, and the calendar of religious festivals. In Numa's Rome, time itself became sacred, not counted by battles, but by rites. His most lasting creation may have been the Temple of Janus, whose doors stayed open during war and closed only in peace. Rome, of course, would rarely see them closed. The third king, Tullus Hostilius, tore off the veil of piety and returned to the sword. He demolished Alba Longa, the city that had once threatened Romulus as a child. In a single generation, it was gone, its people absorbed, its leaders executed, its gods transferred to Roman temples. Rome's appetite for assimilation had begun. And then came Ancus Marcius, who knew when to fight and when to build. He fortified the Janiculum Hill, founded the port of Ostia, and built the first bridge across the Tiber, the Pons Sublicius. Rome was no longer confined to a hilltop. It had touched the river. Trade, grain, and sea access flowed in. Rome had legs now, and it was learning to walk. By the time the fifth king, Tarquinius Priscus, took the throne, the first of the Etruscan rulers, Rome was shedding its skin as a Latin town. Under Priscus, Etruscan engineering and culture reshaped the city. He drained the marshes between the hills, starting the Cloaca Maxima, one of the oldest surviving drainage systems in the world. He laid the groundwork for the Circus Maximus, introducing public games that would come to define Roman identity. Rome wasn't just functioning now, it was performing. But the most transformative vision came from a man who may have begun his life as a servant. By the time the last king fell, Rome was no longer a rough hilltop outpost, but a structured, fortified, and deeply stratified society. The line between myth and history had begun to blur. Not because the myths were forgotten, but because they had been absorbed into Roman identity. Rome didn't reject its legends, it institutionalized them. The kings, real or imagined, had laid the bones of the city. They built its temples, dug its drains, and defined its boundaries. They structured its people into classes, clans, and centuries. They shaped its calendar, its religious obligations, even its architectural skyline. But most of all, they gave Rome its first taste of order and its first confrontation with tyranny. Tarquinius Superbus, the seventh and final king, was everything the Romans would learn to hate in a ruler. Proud, autocratic, and dismissive of both law and counsel, he ruled not by consent but by fear. His building projects were monumental, yes, including the final construction of the Temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus, but his methods were cruel and his power unchecked. Rome, it seemed, had learned one final lesson under the monarchy. Absolute power, when left unchallenged, always ends in ruin. That lesson came to a head in a single searing moment. Sextus Tarquinius, the king's son, assaulted Lucretia, a noble Roman woman whose virtue was beyond question. Her suicide after revealing the crime sent shockwaves through the Roman aristocracy. This was no longer about honor, it was about vengeance, about justice, about reclaiming Rome. Led by Lucius Junius Brutus, the people rose. Tarquin was expelled, and with him, the very concept of kingship. In 509 BCE, Rome declared it would never again be ruled by a king. But the monarchy didn't vanish from memory. It became a cautionary tale, a founding trauma woven into the political DNA of the republic to come. Every law, every office, every check and balance created in the centuries that followed was designed with one goal: never another Tarquin, never another king. And yet, what the kings had built endured. The religious institutions of Numa, the urban planning of the Etruscans, the centuriate organization of Servius Tullius, all remained. Rome had not rejected its past. It had outgrown it. From the ashes of monarchy, a new Rome would rise, wiser, sharper, and far more ambitious. The city no longer belonged to a single man. It belonged to the res publica, the public thing. And so began the Republic. The kings were gone, expelled not just from the throne but from Roman imagination. In their place, a new system emerged, not born of utopian ideals, but of calculated necessity. The monarchy had taught the Romans many things: how to organize, how to build, how to expand, but above all, it had taught them what to fear. So the Romans built a government designed around a single driving principle: no one man should ever hold too much power. This was the dawn of the Roman Republic, founded in 509 BCE. A political experiment unlike anything the ancient world had seen. Power was no longer divine or inherited. It was temporary, limited, and always contested. At the heart of this system were the consuls, two elected magistrates who ruled jointly. Each could veto the other. They served for only 1 year. And once their term ended, they were stripped of their imperium, their power, and became, once again, ordinary citizens. Behind them stood the Senate, a body of aristocrats who did not legislate, but advised, guided, and in practice wielded enormous influence. The Senate did not die with the monarchy. In fact, it thrived in the Republic. It became the guardian of tradition, the anchor of continuity, and eventually the engine of Roman foreign policy. But this new system was deeply unequal. In theory, it was a republic. In practice, it was an oligarchy, controlled by the patricians, Rome's noble families who traced their lineage to the earliest senators appointed by Romulus himself. They monopolized offices, priesthoods, and land. The vast majority of Romans, the plebeians, had no real voice, and for a time they accepted that. But Rome was growing, and pressure was building. Tensions between patricians and plebeians erupted into what would become the struggle of the orders. A long, slow-burn political revolution fought not with weapons, but with walkouts, threats, and constitutional innovation. The plebeians, who made up the backbone of the Roman army, staged the first recorded general strike in Western history. They withdrew from the city, refusing to fight until they were given political representation. And Rome, facing a military crisis, conceded. The result was the creation of the tribunes of the plebs, sacrosanct officials who could veto the actions of other magistrates and protect the rights of ordinary citizens. These tribunes became a powerful counterweight to patrician dominance. Not long after, Rome would carve its first written laws into bronze, the 12 Tables. These laws weren't revolutionary, but they were public, an attempt to replace arbitrary rule with transparency and to anchor the republic in something firmer than elite whim. Through conflict, compromise, and sheer resilience, Rome had created a system that could evolve under pressure, one flexible enough to absorb demands for equality while maintaining its core structure. This adaptability became Rome's greatest strength. As it overcame internal struggles, it turned outward and conquered. From a patchwork of Latin alliances, Rome extended its control across Italy. It fought bitter wars with the Samnites in the hills, absorbed the Etruscans in the north, and clashed with Greek colonies in the south. And when the Greek city of Tarentum called for help from Pyrrhus of Epirus, a brilliant Hellenistic king, Rome encountered something new: war elephants. Pyrrhus won battles, but his victories were devastating. "Another such victory," he said, "and I shall be undone." The phrase Pyrrhic victory was born, and so was a new phase of Roman ambition. Soon after, Rome controlled the Italian peninsula, but then came Sicily and Carthage. The Punic Wars were more than just battles over trade routes. They were existential. Carthage, with its powerful navy and ancient roots, was Rome's mirror and its mortal enemy. The First Punic War forced Rome to build a navy from scratch. Ingeniously, they captured a Carthaginian ship, reverse-engineered it, and created the Corvus, a boarding bridge that let Roman soldiers turn sea battles into infantry fights. Carthage lost Sicily, then Sardinia, then Corsica, but it was the Second Punic War that nearly destroyed Rome. Hannibal, one of the greatest generals in history, led an army, including war elephants, across the Alps into Italy. He crushed Roman forces at Trebia, Lake Trasimene, and Cannae, where over 50,000 Romans died in a single day. Yet Rome refused to surrender. They adapted, they delayed, and they endured. While Hannibal roamed Italy, a young general named Scipio took the fight to Spain and eventually to North Africa. At the Battle of Zama, Scipio defeated Hannibal and earned the title Scipio Africanus. Carthage was broken, but not yet destroyed. That came in the Third Punic War, when Rome razed the city to the ground, enslaved its people, and salted its soil, a warning to the world. Rome now ruled the Western Mediterranean. But victory brought more than glory. It brought cracks. Rome had conquered its enemies, but it couldn't conquer itself. Victory brought wealth, slaves, and land, but it concentrated power into the hands of a few. Small farmers, the heart of the Roman army, were displaced by massive estates run on slave labor. Cities swelled with unemployed citizens. The divide between rich and poor became a chasm. Reformers like Tiberius Gracchus tried to fix this by redistributing land. The Senate responded by clubbing him to death on the Capitol steps. His brother Gaius suffered a similar fate. Rome had crossed a line. Political disagreement was no longer settled by debate, but by assassination. And into this chaos stepped the generals. Marius, a populist war hero, reformed the army by allowing landless citizens to enlist, binding soldiers not to the Republic, but to their commanders. Sulla took it further. In 88 BCE, he marched his army into Rome itself, a taboo so unthinkable it shattered the Republic's constitutional order. He purged his enemies, seized dictatorial power, and then, astonishingly, retired. But the damage was done. The precedent was set. Soon after, three powerful men, Pompey, Crassus, and Julius Caesar, formed the First Triumvirate, an unofficial alliance to dominate Rome. But alliances in Rome were temporary. Caesar's conquest of Gaul made him rich, powerful, and beloved by the army. The Senate, threatened, ordered him to disband and return to Rome. Instead, he crossed the Rubicon, an irreversible act of war. Civil war followed. Caesar defeated Pompey, was named dictator for life, and implemented sweeping reforms. He forgave enemies, restructured debt, and even reformed the calendar. But to many, he looked too much like a king. On the Ides of March 44 BCE, he was stabbed to death by senators, including his ally Brutus, under the statue of Pompey. But Caesar's death did not restore the Republic. It destroyed its illusion. More civil wars followed. Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, joined forces with Mark Antony and Lepidus to form the Second Triumvirate. They defeated Caesar's assassins, but soon turned on each other. At the Battle of Actium, Octavian crushed Antony and Cleopatra and became sole ruler of Rome. He refused to call himself king. Instead, the Senate granted him a new title, Augustus. The Republic, though still alive in name, was now functionally dead. Rome was no longer a republic of citizens, it was an empire. The story of Rome's rise, from mud huts on the Tiber to dominance over the known world, is not a tale of straight lines and inevitable triumphs. It is a story of fractures, reinvention, and an unmatched ability to adapt. The Republic, for all its glory, was not designed to govern an empire. It fractured under the weight of its own success, not because of a single villain, but because of a system that could not bend without breaking. Yet even as the Republic died, its legacy endured. Rome gave the world citizenship as an idea, law as a framework, republicanism as a principle, and empire as a system. And this is only the middle of the story. Next, we enter the age of emperors, of Augustus, Nero, Trajan, Hadrian, and Constantine, the Pax Romana, the Christianization of the empire, the fall of the West, the survival of the East. Rome did not die with the Republic, it transformed, and it will transform again. Subscribe to continue the journey. as we dive into the Roman Empire, the rise of Christianity, the fall of the West, and the thousand-year reign of Constantinople. This is the story of how the world became Roman, and how, in many ways, it still is.